Welcome to RPG Heroes, a podcast where every other week I speak to a true hero in the realm of role-playing games about their journey, their craft, and their views. As your host, I will focus on one particular aspect of this wonderful hobby for the interview, regale you with stories from my own 25 years of experience with role-playing games, and reflect on the major takeaways from the interview. Join me now on this epic journey and awaken the hero in you. Welcome to episode 20 of RPG Heroes. And well, since it's episode 20 and it is the year 2020, I figured it's about time we talk about a little game called Cyberpunk 2020. And of course, the follow-up, which will be coming out hopefully pretty soon as a full set of rules, Cyberpunk Red by R Talsorian. And to help us out today with this topic, we have Rob Mulligan III, the founder of Cyberpunk Uncensored. Now, before you start emailing and messaging me with things like, well, R Talsorian isn't the only company that produces cyberpunk games, you're absolutely right, of course. However, that is the first RPG that I ever came across in my life that is based around the genre of cyberpunk. And now we're talking about the late 90s, early 2000s when I discovered Cyberpunk 2020. And back then, 2020 was the dark future. And it had a whole timeline that is, looking back now, eerily accurate when you think about it. And to be honest, it sometimes really does feel like we do live in the dark future. Except I still don't have a cyber leg and cybernetic eyes and all this other cool stuff that this game promised us. But then again, looking at the game mechanics, I'm not so sure I want to replace a lot of my body with metal and circuitry. Apparently it drives you nuts. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's dive right in. So, if you're new to the whole genre of cyberpunk, or you're new to cyberpunk as a genre for role-playing games, let's just quickly break it down. So the word cyberpunk is a combination of cybernetics, which is replacing limbs and other parts of your body with technology, and punk, which of course is an ethos primarily made up of beliefs such as non-conformity, anti-authoritarianism, anti-corporatism, do-it-yourself ethic, anti-consumerist, anti-corporate greed, etc., etc. So on the one hand, we have cool, shiny stuff to replace our limbs with, and on the other hand, we hate the filthy corporations. Now, there are many, many excellent novels and movies and graphic novels in this genre. So if you want to get into this, well, there's lots to choose from. Famous movies would, of course, include things like Blade Runner, the old one and the new one. I enjoyed them both. And there are really, really, really good books out there. I would always recommend Neuromancer, which is kind of a classic, as well as Snow Crash, which is one that I really love. And what struck me when I first came across Cyberpunk as a role-playing game, after reading quite a lot of cyberpunk literature, I felt that this game was not only very different from the only other RPG I had ever played, which back then was Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. It was not only different in genre, that I was swapping out a bastard sword for some kind of submachine gun, but also the style. Stylistically, this game adheres very closely to all of these ideas that we just talked about when it comes to cyberpunk. And so suddenly you're creating characters who are not necessarily heroes, but they do have a certain ethic. And I found it very interesting. And what I really love about Cyberpunk and the way it's presented in that old book from Cyberpunk 2020 is it just breathes that style all through the text. Even linguistically, stylistically, the way it's written kind of tells you this is a game not just about, not just about combat or about anything, game mechanics, but it's much more about attitude. So we're not necessarily heroes. We're not necessarily always going to be fighting the big bad evil. Not that D&D always has to be about that, just to be clear. But it's much more about a certain aesthetic about looking cool while you do stuff, and being cool and looking cool, and those kind of social ideas being a key aspect of how you should play your character. And I found that very, very interesting. And well, I could talk about this forever, really. But one of the things that one of the other things that struck me as ingenious at the time, and still nowadays, is the fact that in the book, in the rule book, they include a chapter called the Life Path, which is basically rollable tables that tell you how your character came to be in the situation they're in, how they came to be in a certain role, how they got to where they are. And that includes things like where and how did you grow up? What is your family like? Are they still alive or not? Are they in trouble? But also things like what sort of recent events kind of pushed you in a certain direction. And it could be anything from, meeting a mentor or having a failed romantic relationship to having your arm blown off in a war, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, to me, and by the way, if you weren't sure what your character should be like or look like, you could even roll for that. Even the aesthetic styles, the ethnicity of your character, certain personality traits, etc., including even things like what is your favorite object in the whole world. You could all roll for that. And the book made very clear you can roll, and if you don't like this with the idea of your character, then you can always choose certain things. But what this does, this life path idea, is it grounds your character in the world that this game is about. And that is especially helpful if you're not that well versed in the genre, or if you're new to role-playing, but also if you just want to challenge yourself to create a character that you wouldn't have come up with on your own. So all these rollable tables, they help you to kind of break the mold, which really fits the punk ethos, if you ask me. To break the mold of the characters that you tend to create and do something different for a change. And that to me is just a stroke of genius. And one of the things that I find fun nowadays about playing Cyberpunk 2020 is that it feels retro. So there is this 80s aesthetic to the game, and some of the technology that they've chosen to use in the rules. Some of it is kind of outdated by now, and some of it is still ahead of what we have. And so therefore, I'm really happy that this year, hopefully this year, the full rules for Cyberpunk Red will come out from the same company, R Talsorian, which will update the timeline, so it'll go a bit further into the future, so once again we get the feeling we're playing in the future and not in the quite horrific now. And on top of that, of course, it will help to update the technology, etc., so that it once again feels a bit like the future, especially things like mobile phones, etc. Like all this kind of technology has progressed way beyond what Cyberpunk 2020 predicted. And it's my hope that it will help at least our group to not get into the situation too often where we say, well, surely by then we would have had this and this technology. So, other games in the cyberpunk genre. There are loads of them, and I'm sure that I'm going to miss out on some really great ones, but, I can't mention them all. That would make the episode very long and rather tedious to listen to. Plus, you people know how to use Google. But a few that I would like to mention at least are... one is called Altered State, which is by Runehammer, which was my original first guest on the podcast, and since then he has created Altered State. It's built on his on the engine of his game, Index Card RPG, and it expands on it to make it really cyberpunk. And it's a wonderful game. The rules are written in a very quick and clear way. You can get to the table pretty quickly. Character creation is easy as always with his products, and it has plenty of depth as well. Another game that I think I should mention is Interface Zero. Now, this is Interface Zero is a cyberpunk game and a cyberpunk kind of game world, so it's a lot of lore, and what the creator has done very nicely is he's created this game to go on top of an engine of a different game. So for instance, the one that I have here on the shelf is based on a Pathfinder / Starfinder, and what's great about that is, well, first of all, the lore, etc., the stuff that this guy writes is just really great. It really feels like a more futuristic type of cyberpunk than, of course, the rather old books of 2020. And on top of that, it's really handy sometimes to be able to play a new game, but not have to really relearn everything there is about role-playing games. So if you're familiar with, for instance, Starfinder already, and you want to play a more cyberpunk game, it's pretty easy to pick up Interface Zero for that particular game, and you're off to a pretty quick start, because everything with feats and all these things, it kind of works the same, which is handy. And he's created this game for several game systems. So if you're interested in kind of putting a cyberpunk skin on a game you're already familiar with, well, that's definitely possible. And then there's one more that I would like to mention, which is called Hack the Planet, which is a Forged in the Dark game, which means that it's based on the rules of Blades in the Dark. And that's another really unique, interesting take on the cyberpunk genre. So if you like games like Blades in the Dark, but you would like to play a cyberpunk world, well, then that's an excellent choice. So going back to Cyberpunk 2020 by R Talsorian, the original kind of reason for this episode. Well, I already mentioned a few things that I found and still find very interesting about this game. One being the life path, and the other being kind of the aesthetic and the way it's all presented. And another thing, of course, for me back then was, well, I was used to just one game where you rolled a d20 and you added some things, and then you had the taco and all that stuff. And you had equipment like swords and all these things, and it was all very fantasy oriented, and I loved it, and I still actually quite like that game. But then when I came across Cyberpunk, all of a sudden, oh, there's no d20, it's a d10. And that kind of changes things. It changes the probability of certain outcomes. And the way combat was designed was, well, the idea of their combat design, that chapter is called Friday Night Firefight, which I just think is an excellent name. The idea behind it was that it was supposed to be as realistic and gritty as possible. So there's some kind of Hollywood-ish things in there. So there's, for instance, if you kill someone, then there's a table to roll what kind of Hollywood overacting they do when they die. But that's kind of, I think, more of a wink. But a lot of the combat is quite... it feels realistic, let's put it that way. I mean, what do I know? I've never been in combat, thank goodness. But it feels realistic. And it feels realistic in a way that it's really dangerous. So no matter how long your character's been around, getting shot in the face will most likely end your life in that game, which feels realistic. And so there's no upfront kind of hit points in the game. There are hit points, but they kind of go to the background. So what you do more than counting hit points is you're looking at how badly wounded am I, and how badly does that affect everything that my character can try to do. And I found that particular aspect to be very interesting when I came from D&D, where until you reach 0 hit points, nothing really changes about your character. In Cyberpunk, very quickly, being wounded puts you in this death spiral where things get worse and worse, and you're kind of trying to run away, holding your guts in, and it's all... it's messy, and it's dirty, and it's dangerous, and it made combat feel like something to avoid at all costs sometimes, and only to engage in when you have the upper hand. And that made me, at least, look at the game and at combat in an RPG very differently. Another aspect that I really enjoy about a good game of Cyberpunk is that it matters what you dress like, what you look like. I mean, that's in my real life. It's something I don't pay too much attention to. But in that game, what it makes you realize is, okay, if you want to get into a really, really popular high-end club, you better look the part, or they're just not going to let you in. And also, if you are the kind of player who likes to have an assortment of large, very high output weapons, that's cool and all. But if you want to walk into a corporate office with all that stuff strapped on, well, forget about it. They're just not going to let you in, and everywhere you go, you're going to be hassled for it. In that game, it's possible to put armor under your skin, and you look like a well, I don't know, like some kind of monster, I suppose. And that's fine, but in social situations, that's put you at a huge disadvantage. And again, that sort of aspect of the game made me look differently at other role playing games as well. Made me think, well, yeah, actually, if I'm playing in a fantasy game and I've got 7 swords strapped to my back somehow and I'm still able to walk, then, what are people going to react to me like? If I walk into a small village, people might be terrified. Like, who is this crazy person with all the weapons and he's still got blood and gore on his armor from, several fights. And, he's got this look in his eye like he's about to murder everybody. So the aesthetic part of what goes on in a game, that I really got more interested in that, let's say, when I started reading and playing Cyberpunk. So, if you're still listening, then probably you're quite curious about what the future of this game holds. And, for that, we're going to talk, and other things, we're going to talk to Rob Mulligan. Welcome to the show, Robert Mulligan III. This man loves Cyberpunk more than anybody I know, and he seems to be working around the clock to promote this game that he loves by doing several actual plays, interviewing all the cool people in the community, running a podcast, and organizing more and more games for people to join and enjoy online. He runs a growing Cyberpunk community that's very active and friendly, and that discusses the old and new versions of Cyberpunk as well as genre-appropriate media. All this under the flag of his very own Cyberpunk Uncensored. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first question really is, for most of my guests, since you do stuff with role-playing games, how did you get into role-playing games?
Yeah, I started back in like the late 80s, early 90s. Like a lot of people around, my age and that got into it. I started with Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was the second edition of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And then when Cyberpunk came out, and I still play D&D, I still like Dungeons and Dragons for like the fantasy side of things.
Yeah.
But when Cyberpunk came out, I just, I dove into that. For me, it was around, I think it was like the second edition. It was like early mid 90s is when I really dove in, early 90s.
Yeah.
And I liked both. I like D&D for the fantasy, Cyberpunk for like the dark future stuff,
Yeah.
But Cyberpunk just, I don't know, it took precedence. It was my favorite. It was the most interesting to me. So over the years, I've kind of stuck with that one. And then in recent times, really dove back into it when I saw, the video game was coming and the red version of the tabletop role-playing game. So, but that's how I got started was, Dungeons and Dragons and then got into Cyberpunk.
Yeah. And with Cyberpunk, like, did you just find the books in a store somewhere, or did somebody tell you, hey, did you know about this game?
Yeah, it was a best friend of mine, my buddy Eric back then. And like a lot of people back then, we didn't have, the internet and Facebook and Twitch and YouTube and all these great resources to learn new things. You would learn new things from friends and that being at school and stuff. So but no, he showed me what it was. He showed me Dungeons and Dragons, and then when Cyberpunk started getting hot, he's like, oh, have you seen this? And like, I was like, oh wow, it's like Dungeons and Dragons but the future. And so a friend got me into it and we started playing and just hadn't stopped.
Yeah, I think it's a great time also to start playing, because back then there was a lot of kind of cyberpunk related movies coming out.
Oh yeah,
some really crazy ones.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the genre got hot from. Was like, it definitely, even though it's future, it always has that sort of retro wave vibe to it. That old 80s sort of mirrored sunglasses and
yeah, big old leather jackets with shoulder padding.
Teased hair and everything,
Yeah. And so if you would have to kind of give the elevator pitch to somebody who hasn't, who's been playing D&D and is thinking about maybe branching out, what is Cyberpunk essentially to you?
Yeah, well, to summarize, it's been called high tech, low life. That's the original sort of tagline or logline, if you will, I guess, the description. But ultimately, it's just like a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, but set in the dark dystopian future. So it's, no magic and potions and dragons and monsters. It's all, human-based with the exception of like AI and cyborgs and, getting all the cybernetics. But you get cybernetic arms and weapons and attachments and mods and, all kinds of weapons from melee to guns and stuff. So it's pretty much a dark dystopian future. But it's not pushed so far that it's sci-fi. You know, there's no aliens. There's not a lot. There's not, even though there are orbital stations, things that involve space, it's not very space driven. It's still earthbound. It's very, very relatable. That's why I love it. Is it's easy to immerse yourself in it because it is human based. It's just set in the dark future.
Yeah, and some of us might think we currently live in the dark future.
Oh my God, yeah. No, it's definitely been coming to fruition. I mean, even if you look at where I'm at over here in LA, just in the past month, with all the fires in the past weeks, the sky was actually all red. Ooh, and I don't know if you've seen everybody posting pictures on the Cyberpunk groups, but they're like, oh my God, Cyberpunk Red is here. Because the game's coming out, and in Cyberpunk Red, it's post-nuclear fallout from the fourth corporate war. Yeah. So the sky is, red from all the fallout and everything. So, we're living in it right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, scary kind of. Yeah. I saw some really, really amazing drone footage, I think from San Francisco or kind of in that direction. I'm not sure where it was, but wow. Yeah. And then somebody put the music, the intro music to Blade Runner under it.
Yeah, I've been seeing people put like, an A and B picture of like San Francisco and then Blade Runner, and it matches. The tones of red and everything. It's scary.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay. And so when it comes to an actual game of Cyberpunk, what makes it different, would you say, to a regular game of Dungeons and Dragons or Call of Cthulhu or something that people might be more familiar with?
Yeah, I think it's, aside from, the environment and the aesthetics with it, like I said, it being, future and more based on reality because there's no magic and monsters and things. Yeah. But there are cybernetics and crazy technology and stuff that kind of advances beyond our normal, reality currently. Mm-hmm. But for me, I think it's what makes it so unique and so different is not just can you immerse yourself in it because of the relatability of the roles and the things, because you're not just trying to be another creature or animal or fantasy thing. It's all different, humans and all different styles of that. So it's easier to relate and kind of dive into it. It also has all those dangerous and dark kind of gritty tones that the real world has. Yeah. But I think what makes it so exciting and cool is just it's so dangerous. To me, what I got attracted, how I was attracted to it was because it was so raw and dangerous and just dirty feeling, like it just whereas in D&D, and I love D&D, don't get me wrong, but in that it almost feels a little nerfed or something. Like, you can always take a potion when you start off. You've already got, even if you're a beginning level, you typically at least have your certain spells that you can do, and I don't know, it's a little more flexible. And whereas in Cyberpunk, you have more chances to actually die. In the rule books, it even talks about, it mentions a few times throughout, like when it talks about dangerous things that happens, like in battle or taking damage. And when you get to a certain level, it'll even say, oh, if you got to that point of damage or whatever, what's your new character named? Like it'll say wise ass things like that, like just reminding you, like, hey, don't forget, like you are expendable. Like this isn't some fantasy realm. You can get killed and have to make a new character. So you kind of play it that way. You play it kind of paranoid and dangerous, like you feel it. And that's what I love about Cyberpunk. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't matter how cool you are. You get shot in the face, you get shot in the face.
Right. No, totally. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's something that occurred to me when I started reading those rule books. It was late 90s, I think. And I also came from second edition AD&D.
Nice.
And when I was reading it, I thought I could almost hear the voice of the writer sometimes, like joking a little bit, like throwing a few kind of mild punches towards the fantasy genre, like, there's no potions and elves here, people.
Right.
And especially when it came to the lethality, there is no healing potion. Just, if you die, you die. Or if you get very badly wounded, well, okay, replace
and Cyberpunk, and Cyberpunk is known for, like in the core writing, they'll put that attitude. So it does such a great job of not just explaining how Cyberpunk is dangerous, the vibe and the environments and how the world is. And it tells you like, hey, people have attitude and they're sassy and short fused and like there's no trusting and everybody's backstabbing and it's a cutthroat world and just be careful. And they'll explain all that. And then within that description, they'll do, like you said, they'll slip in like little attitude and little, I don't know, innuendos and things that they'll put in the actual print that just seals the deal with that vibe. And I love it, you know, like just it has attitude.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And would you say that the fan base, like the people that tend to play these games, are they any different, would you say, from the fan base of, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons or any of the other, the big ones, the most famous games?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's very similar. I noticed that, you know, across the board, for the most part, role-playing game community people, or like the players that enjoy it, that whole community, it just seems more welcoming. I mean, don't get me wrong, the internet has trolls.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
in every genre or industry, there's people that are, you know, quote unquote elitists.
Yeah.
You know, and that's whether you're in music, film, gaming, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like, don't get me wrong, you know, there's bad and good everywhere.
Yeah.
But I do feel that comparatively, the gaming industry, at least on the tabletop role-playing side, it's more welcoming, more flexible. I don't know if because it just has that foundation of the old school nerd geek community where we were all kind of grew up being made fun of and stuff, and now we try to not do it as much. I don't know if that's what it is, but you know what I mean? I feel that, you know, because I, you know me, I work in the music industry and the film industry. I love the gaming, you know, in the gaming side. I definitely see the gaming industry is a bit more supportive and welcoming. You know what I mean? Like if I post, for instance, a new film I'm working on, or some new music project or something, I'll get more people that are, oh, what the hell? You know, you're just bragging, or they'll troll it, or they'll say something bad, or they won't share. I don't know. It's just more, you get the equal amount of trolling as you will support sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And yet in the role-playing game, on the tabletop side, at least, when I started pushing Cyberpunk Uncensored and the streaming, the Game Master tips, all the things I do, and sometimes it can be a bit much because I'll share things daily because I am creating content almost daily.
Yeah.
But I don't get a lot of hate back, which I love. I love that no matter how much I put out, for the most part, I get a lot of great support. A lot of people are very open and they want that content. Or if they don't come and troll me about it, at least. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know, it seems like a better community. I really love it.
Yeah, it's really great. And sometimes I get the feeling that it might be related to the fact that our hobby, at least part of it, is understanding what somebody else feels like, because you have to think what does my character feel like, and maybe that kind of fosters empathy. I don't know, just a little sidetrack there. And you mentioned just now Cyberpunk Uncensored. So how did that get started exactly?
Well, it's funny. I always mention, not always, but I brought this up a few times before, that the quarantine, the whole pandemic situation, kind of springboarded me into this and got me started, at least, you know, online and pushing it, because I was playing Cyberpunk at home with friends and my wife, and we were doing, you know, D&D almost every week, Cyberpunk every week. And then the whole pandemic thing happened, and COVID and the quarantine, and we just stopped getting together. There was no more getting together in person. So I started looking online, and that's how I found Roll20. I got, you know, more into Discord. I got the Facebook groups and Instagram, and I was like, man, this is great. Like there's a whole, you know, community for this now. I didn't even realize, because I was just playing at home and I didn't really pursue it. And then that's when I found out about, you know, all the different things going on between Red and the video game, just all the details about it. And it was through that I was like, man, let me dive into this. Like, I'm passionate about Cyberpunk. I love it. I play it all the time. And I make props for, you know, filming and stuff. And like, I'm just really into just everything about it. And so like I started streaming the game live. I said, let me put together a live stream doing Cyberpunk. And I kind of combined 2020 with the Red Jumpstart rules and homebrewed a little, like a lot of people were doing when Red Jumpstart came out. And then through that, I started getting good feedback. And I was like, man, let me also launch a podcast about this, because I want to talk about it too, not just play the game. I started the podcast, then I started making videos of that. Then I started doing interviews, and I was like, man, this is really like anything I want to do in Cyberpunk, I can do. Let me come up with a brand to kind of umbrella everything I'm doing Cyberpunk. So that's how Cyberpunk Uncensored started. And if you go to cyberpunkuncensored.com, I'm updating it all the time. But like, you know, we've got the podcast, the live game streams. I do the Game Master tips. I'm starting a GM roundtable with other GMs where we're going to do monthly thing. We're doing a Choomba chat for our Discord. So I'm just constantly Cyberpunk content, anything I can think of, I'm putting it out. And Cyberpunk Uncensored is just that, you know, brand umbrella that I do it under.
Yeah, and it looks like the way that you're doing it is very effective because I mean, obviously, it started in the pandemic, so it's a pretty young thing. It's pretty new. But when I was thinking about, I want to do an episode about Cyberpunk, well, obviously, I approached R Talsorian and said, "Hey, is Mike available?" And they said, "Nope, not for a while. He's very, very, very busy." And I figured, well, fair enough. And then I thought, okay, who would be cool to talk to from the community? So I'm in several of these Facebook groups for Cyberpunk, and then I noticed like, whoa, this Mulligan guy, he's he's all over the place, he's everywhere, and he's doing really 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 cool things. So I thought, okay, I need to talk to you.
Nice.
And what I really enjoyed was at some point I watched an interview between you and Jay Gray from R Talsorian
Yeah.
about the red rule set, and that got me really fired up about red because so far I'd seen the jumpstart kit. I haven't played it yet, but I'm gonna run it for a convention pretty soon. So I've been reading up, but of course the jumpstart is pretty limited, and I
Yeah.
still play 2020 with my original group. So I figured, well, I don't know if I want to switch yet. I'm a bit of I can be a bit slow with those things. And then you were talking about all the things that I haven't seen yet in full rules. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
pretty good. Yeah.
No, we
So,
were lucky enough. I got hit up by Jay. Well, I should clarify this. I hit him up,
yeah.
asking, "Hey, I see you're kind of putting out the red rule core rules, a beta version to certain online streamers."
Yeah.
And at the time, I watched live gameplay all the time. I listened to the podcast,
Yeah.
and I was trying to pull out information from other people's gameplay, like, "Ooh, that rule is different from 2020. How does that work?" And I'm trying to figure it all out. So I just hit him up direct. I'm like, "Hey, look, I'm streaming, I'm playing. This is what I'm doing. Is there any chance I can get a copy?" And he sent back like, "No, unfortunately, we've already hit our limitation. We've already passed that point."
Yeah.
I was kind of late to the game on hitting them up. I was apprehensive at contacting them and asking them for that.
Yeah.
But then it wasn't too long after that. I think maybe like a few days, if not a week. He hit me back with a copy of it. He's like, "Hey, look, I'm changing my rules. Here's a copy of Red Beta. I've been watching what you do, and I love what you're doing. Check it out."
Yeah.
And so like, man, I was just floored. I was so excited. Not just to get it, but for him to say, he actually checked out all the things I was doing and was impressed. Because here's someone from R Talsorian.
Exactly.
So I got the red rules, and I that's what I'm streaming on the YouTube and on the Twitch.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's definitely way more than just the red jumpstart kit. And anybody that's into 2020, believe me, when I was doing jumpstart combined with 2020, and I was watching other people do red beta, and I was trying to figure it out, I was like, is this going to be in depth enough, or am I sticking with 2020? Because jumpstart, as you know, it, like you said, it's very limited.
Yeah.
But once I dove into the red beta, it's like, man, they cover everything and then some. They've streamlined and trailed back on certain rules where it's appreciated, but then they've expanded on things that is really cool.
I'm so curious and not just a little bit jealous. So one of the things I hear a lot is from people that play 2020 or that are thinking about playing 2020 is the net running. That's always been kind of a thing. Like in my group, for instance, we've been playing since the late 90s. None of us have ever actually really understood the net running chapter. And we kind of gave up on it.
It's so funny. I don't think anyone really has. And I've talked to so many GMs, so many players that have been doing it since 90s till now. And I have literally not found one, not even one person that's like, "Oh yeah, 2020 net running, that's my jam. Like that's my favorite role. That's what I do." And like, no one did it. It's so difficult and confusing, and it takes away from the party.
Yeah. Because I remember looking at it the first time and thinking, "Ooh, cool! Like a mini game." With the it looks like a crossword puzzle thing, and
it resembles like a dungeon crawl or something.
Kinda,
like in D&D, it's like the dungeon crawl style. A map, and it's figuring out where you're going and what's in it, and it's just
random encounters and everything.
But it's too much, and it pulls that net runner away from the party. So typically in 2020, when you hit net running portions of gameplay, the rest of the party is sitting there twiddling their thumbs, waiting for the net runner to get done. It's just not. It wasn't that cool.
No,
I mean, it was cool. It just wasn't that fun, I should say, because it sounded really cool. It's exciting. You want it there. but it just wasn't functioning the way I think it should to make it accessible to everyone and part of the group play. But Red totally changed that, as you see in Jumpstart.
Yeah.
You know, it's so streamlined and easier to comprehend now. It's easier to play. It's more involved with the players, because when you're net running, you're not just in the net, you're also in meat space. So there's that, you know, combination of like, you know, you're still with the party. You have to be within 6 meters of where you jack into a system. So there's no more just chilling at your apartment, logging into a system or getting on the internet across the world. Like it's very much part of the party and part of the gameplay now. I think they did such an amazing job.
That's been a very, very smart move, I think. Yeah. To keep the group kind of together, or at least to force more risk onto the person doing the hacking. Yeah. Because before, the main risk was getting your brain fried, which, you know, it's a scary idea, of course, but it's a little bit less likely to happen. But if you're in the middle of a firefight trying to hack a thing, wow, you know, that really amps up the danger levels.
Oh, yeah. No, and they still have a lot of that danger. I can't go into too much detail, but you know, there's still things like you're not just taking damage to your hit points or your body. You know, there's also things that attack programs in your cyber deck. There's things that can catch you on fire and do things to you and mess up your stats and things. So there's all kinds of angles that these programs can come at you from.
Cool.
And and the Albacon that you're doing your Jumpstart game next weekend or whatever, I'm doing a Cyberpunk panel for Albacon too.
That's cool.
And James Hutt and Jay Gray are going to join me. And James told me during that panel, he's going to talk about some of the programs and things that aren't covered in Jumpstart or public yet. So that'll be kind of cool. We'll get to kind of release some info about these programs and things, hopefully.
Watch this space, people.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. And so what's your take on Red so far? Like what's your favorite kind of change from 2020 so far? Without going into details you're not allowed to talk about, obviously.
Yeah, no problem. And I can talk about, you know, as much as we've covered in the live gameplay and what we've done in interviews with the guys at R Talsorian. So there is quite a bit we can talk about. I just can't read directly from the rules or get into, you know, precise crunchiness of it, if you will.
No. Yeah.
But yeah, my favorite part is probably the life path stuff. You know, Cyberpunk has always had a really cool life path.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of unique comparatively to other, you know, role-playing games.
Yeah.
With Red, they don't just have like the general life path stuff that explains you as like a person in the world, right? But also specific to roles. So whatever role you pick, there's like a whole like little, you know, multi-chart thing that tells you about that role. So like if you're a, you know, for instance, like just a fixer, you know, it might work out like parts of town or who you work with or what type of fix you are. And like, not that wasn't around in 2020, you know, because there are source books that cover those kind of expanded options, right? But what I like about Red is it's all inclusive. I feel like that core rule book is going to have, like I said, expansions on parts that are truly appreciated that like in the past you wouldn't get without a source book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite parts is like the life path stuff, the individual ones.
Yeah, I agree. Because I remember trying to create characters in second edition Dungeons and Dragons when it was all new to me and to everybody who was playing at the table. We were all teenagers. What do we know? You know, but trying to come up with a backstory or trying to come up with why am I a rogue or what does a rogue even do? That wasn't easy. You had to read a lot of stuff and try and use your imagination, which it's nothing wrong with that. But when I got my hands on the Cyberpunk book back then, I thought, whoa, so here's a book that actually helps me ground my character in the world that it's made for. Thank you.
Right.
No,
exactly. Totally. Yeah. And you still, you know, you still use your imagination, you expand on those details. You still have to connect the dots and have it make sense to the overall story, your character and your relationship to the other players. You know, that's why a session 0 is always important, you know, to kind of establish all those background and details and relationships. But totally.
It, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And no, like you said, it totally gives you, you know, more guidance at least, or at least options. And it kind of lays out, you know, a good foundation to build that. It's very cool. I love it.
Yeah. So it's good to see that that's still there and it's actually expanded a bit. Yeah. Excellent. Very good. Okay. And is there any part, and this is going to be a kind of a mean question, anything that you think, I wish they hadn't done that?
No, I honestly, there's nothing I dislike. I don't think they've made any, at least in my opinion, I don't think they've made any mistakes or things in my mind. You know, I think what I've been saying to people when I talk about it is what I love about it is it makes sense. You know, I've never been the type of learner where you can just tell me, hey, this and this equals this. I've always been the type of learner, like I want to know why, you know, I want to understand the mechanics behind that mathematics, and that'll help me understand why I'm getting the end result. And then I'll learn it. I'll know it better in and out. I've always been that kind of learner. I just don't want the face value answer. And I think that's what's so cool about Cyberpunk is that no matter how much I dissect it or think about, oh, why did they set it up like that? And I'm like, the second I start really thinking, I'm like, oh my God, that makes perfect sense. This is actually how reality would be. Like, I don't know. There's nothing I can complain about. And the one other thing I wanted to mention, aside from the life path thing that I really love that they did, is the improvement points. Like instead of, you know, just kind of laying out, you get so many points, you can use them to increase skills, stats, whatever. You know, roll ability and all your skills. In this, there's kind of a chart, and it kind of lays it out, like depending on if you're just doing like a session of a part of a campaign or you completed a whole campaign, you either reward the group or individuals of the group, right? And within that, you're not just rewarding like, oh, this guy, you know, was a great socializer within the campaign. This guy was a great combat person, or this guy did this well. It also goes into like, you know, not just the character, but the player. Oh, you did really good at role playing. So that's what I love about like this is it kind of, I don't want to say breaks the fourth wall, but it kind of pulls you in and rewards you for being a good player, not just the character within it, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of fun, kind of neat.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that because, you know, all too often we like you say, we reward the character and the player is just supposed to do his thing or her thing.
Right. And you know how it is as a GM, you know, some players deserve a reward for that because some players will come to the table with, you know, getting into voice, they're acting it out. They're just really into it, and it makes the game more fun. It's more immersive, and like, it's kind of cool. You can reward players for that, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember years ago, and I'm talking maybe more than a decade, I ran Cyberpunk for a group of friends, and I told them every time before the session, I said that, look, if you do this, or if you bring this, or if you wear this, I'll give you a small in-game bonus. So, you know, nice. For instance, I said, wear something that your character would wear, you know, and then one of my friends, he has this old army helmet, and he just happened to play a character who was an army vet. So he said, cool. So he shows up wearing an army helmet. He was wearing it in the street coming to my house.
Nice.
So yeah, of course you're going to get a bonus for that.
I kind of like that. I might use that in the ongoing streams that we do, because my players, they're fun. You know, they get into character. I really love the way that they role play. My wife is one of them. I love the way she does it. She really gets into character. But then I also have like one player who's a net runner, and he'll put, you know, the green screen Night City sort of background, and then when he hits the net, it goes to all this digital code.
Oh, cool.
So like, he has fun with it while we play. But I didn't even think about you know, kind of putting it out to the players, like, hey, I might reward you with something in the game, you know, for your character if you come, you know, wearing something, or do a little bit of cosplay, or bring something else, you know,
exactly.
character. I really like that. That's fun.
Yeah, it's really a lot of fun. And usually it would be something small, like a re-roll or a, you know, a small bonus on something for just one particular situation. But they usually really went for it, and that's cool.
I love that idea.
Yeah. And so when the game rules say I'm going to reward players for good player behavior, basically, does the book also say this is what we think good player behavior is?
Yeah. No, the chart, you know, kind of explains, you know, if it's good player ability, and then it'll kind of give different ranks, like different versions of how that might go down. It's really cool. Really explains it, you know?
Nice. So it could even be seen as a small kind of guidance on what makes a good player.
Oh, big time. And that's the cool thing about, I think, what they did with Red is they haven't lost the ability to explain in detail what they need to. You know, one of the complaints with 2020 is that it was too crunchy. It was too much info. It was too much for some people, you know, but I think that's what people loved about the reality-based feeling of that. But I feel like in Red, they still have that. They've streamlined it and made it easier. But things are covered. Like, I really don't feel like there's anything there where I'm like, I need more info on that. I'm at a loss right here. And an example of that would be like in 2020, you know, if you're an exec or, you know, a corp, you know, in Red, I think they're called execs now instead of just corp. But and I think that's kind of cool, because the differentiation of like a corporation and an exec. So there's no, when you say corp, it's definitely a corporation. You say exec, it's the person, you know?
Yeah.
But back in 2020, you know, like resources and using your ability, your role ability, right?
Yeah.
It was very vague. It's very vague. It doesn't really tell you exactly what that corporate guy can do at what level, you know? So it's, the GM's always kind of, okay, I guess you can do this. And they're just figuring it out and kind of winging it. And that's fine. That's completely fine.
Yeah.
But in Red, they define that. And I love that. They kind of tell you, hey, if you're at this level, you have access to these things from your corporation. And in fact, roll this. And this is, you know, the type of backup person that you have at this level. You get a couple backup people from the corporation or this, or, you know, and it does that with like the lawman. It does that with different roles. Rocker Boy is also another one that was a bit confusing on their ability, you know, to influence people in 2020. All that stuff is very much so defined in Red, and I love it because there's no confusion.
Yeah, and no debate then also.
Yeah, no debate. It's right there. It's awesome.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. One thing I always got confused about in 2020 is cover. Even though it's described and I understand that cover gives stopping power to bullets, it was always kind of like, okay, so I'm behind cover. I'm going to pop out and shoot and pop back. How many actions is that, you know? When I pop out, can somebody take a quick shot? So those kind of situations tended to get a bit confusing in our group, at least. And I guess we have the extra handicap of not actually being native speakers. You know, and when I got to learn those rules, I was, 19? So, yeah, getting old.
Showing our age.
Yep. Yeah. So in the one thing that so far in the group that I played 2020 with, the one thing that we all seem to be kind of disappointed by a little bit is the lack of body location. So one of the things we really enjoy is like, oh yeah, I'm going to take a shot at his arm or his right leg, and you know, you roll the dice if you don't aim for a specific spot. And we like that specificity, and I get the feeling, I don't know how it is in the full rules, but in the Jumpstart kit, it's just body or head, right?
Yeah. No, there's still some more detail with that you'll see in Red. Okay. And also, and back on the cover thing, they do cover in Red. You know, they do acknowledge that information. I guess I should reword that differently so it's not confusing. But yeah, it's, you know, very similar. Except for the fact they've simplified and made it, in my mind, make more sense, like I've said before, to where you got to remember that during combat, during your round of action or whatever, it's happening simultaneously. So everyone is doing things at the same time. Everything's kind of broken into these little 3-second intervals, so you can kind of comprehend every 3 seconds everybody gets to do something. But it's all happening at the same time. So the idea is if you are behind cover, the only way that cover truly is cover is if you stay behind cover 100%. If you're poking out at all to shoot, or you're moving in and out of it or whatever, someone can get a shot off at you. And that makes sense, because think about it. If all this is happening at the same exact time, while you're popping out, shooting me and hiding back, I'm taking my shot when you pop out. I'm not waiting for you to pop out, shoot, pop back, and then I take my turn to shoot at you. You know, in reality, I would be doing it while you pop out. So like, that's kind of how they handle it in Red. Is the only time you're undercover is if you're undercover 100%. You can't be popping in. You know, if you do, then they can see you pop out. And then as far as targeted shots, you can still do targeted shots. You know, there's still and I can't get into too much detail, but it's head and body, but there are other things you can do with targeted shots, whether it be on a person or even on a vehicle or items. It goes into some cool options. They did expand some vehicle stuff, which is really cool when it comes to combat.
Nice. Ah, cool. Okay. Yeah, because I remember getting into situations where we kind of got to the game kind of ground to a halt, saying, but I'm behind cover. And then one other thing that happens sometimes is, somebody's kind of partially covered, so they are behind a car door, let's say, and I shoot. Fine. I roll for location and it says leg. I'm like, but I wouldn't aim for the leg, would I?
Right.
And then the game master says, but you didn't aim for a specific location.
Yeah, I think what they do now, and it makes sense to me, like, look at it this way, okay? If you're the GM, right, and someone just takes a shot off at someone, say they're in that sort of situation, they're partially hiding behind a table or car door and whatever, right? And you're not fully covered, so the person can shoot you.
Yeah.
But now it's not randomly rolling and then it gives you like leg or thigh. That doesn't make sense. Now the GM basically tells you. So you unless they're calling a targeted shot to like the head or a particular thing or something, like I said, they give you options. You'll see.
Yeah.
But unless you're doing a targeted shot, you're just shooting off, right? So now the GM, they can take that situation into consideration. They can say, okay, look, I know he's behind this car door. So if the guy just took a shot, it's obviously going to hit his chest or arms or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so you kind of just take it scene for scene how it would work, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And so I've also been asking around people around me, like, hey, is there anything you would like to ask about Cyberpunk? And one thing that one of my good friends called Arthur asked me, so, and it's also something we notice in our campaigns, is it often kind of turns into an arms race. Like, okay, let's get the best possible protection, obviously, because it's a lethal game. Good. Then the bad guys will do the same, and then okay, but then we need to up the damage that we do with our weapons. So let's get the heaviest pistols and the heaviest rifles, etc. And how do you counter that happening, or do you even counter it? Do you care?
Yeah, I mean, it always happens. That's one thing that you have to tactfully try to deal with in Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
I will say that red is set up in such a way that probably will be less of a problem. There's not a whole lot of layering armor and things.
No.
When you do, you take such negatives. It's a little harder to be so beefed up with armor, right? In red comparatively to 2020. So they do kind of handle just some of that within the rules that are there, within like what the SP stats are, what the damage is. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of within the game itself, but that's not to say that over time, a player, and especially in 2020, like you said, they start getting enough money that they're buying all the best stuff.
Yeah.
They have the best weapons. They've stolen it off all the enemies they've encountered. They've discovered it through exploring. They have everything, and they're just, a hero, quote unquote, like D&D style, a hero that cannot be defeated. There's ways to kind of handle that. Like I said, red, it's not as necessary, but one of the most traditional ways is just kind of mirror that player. I think that's a Pondsmith GM tip from way back in the day, is, you can kind of mirror the player. If they're that much of a badass, well, maybe there's an assassin after them that's of that caliber, has all the same weapons, same armor. It puts them at the same level where they're still able to take damage and have to have that threat. That's not my favorite way, because at that point you're just, oh, they're up here, let me get up there. And then if they go up more, then you got to go up there. And it just, where does it stop? Eventually you hit the ceiling, and then they're in a world where the only people they're battling are their arch nemesis or whatever, and then all of a sudden the rest of the world doesn't mean anything. And that sucks. So that's my last resort, is the whole mirror thing. That might be kind of cool to drop in once in a while, but I think the best way is, you're the GM, you're in control. So if you giveth, you can taketh, so like if you're giving them so much money, so many weapons, so much armor, have somebody steal it from them. Have it fall apart or something. If they have so many cybernetics, maybe their body rejects it, or there's like a new chemical war thing that somebody hits them with, or they inhale in a certain environment that does something that makes the cybernetics detach from the body. You can get creative, but my main point here is whatever they have, you can take away from them, and you can do it tactfully where it doesn't feel completely railroaded, but it can kind of bring them back down a bit. And then if they want to build back up, it's a whole process. And then maybe you've learned from the first time. So then if they're trying to build back up, you can implement some other things, like make it really hard for them to find those amazing weapons. If they are fighting someone, or they're in a location where they find it, and oh man, I didn't think they would kill that guy, but they did. I was going to have him get away. Now they took his weapon. I didn't want them to have that. Well, what you can do is just make it, okay, there was some type of, the corporation he works for put a device on the weapon. So when it leaves a certain area, or a certain fingerprint on it, or a DNA, I don't know. You can get creative. There's plenty of movies and ideas out there, but I feel like you can avoid some of those things. And red handles a lot of that, because red is that, like I said, post-fourth corporate war, it's post-nuclear fallout. things are not readily available. You have to source almost everything.
Yeah.
And that helps because it's just not easy. Even when you go to a night market or midnight market, the best things might not be there. You might make a contact or you find some things and then, oh, you want that? Well, you got to go to this part of the world or town, or I heard there's an abandoned warehouse over here. And like, you know, it becomes this whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I feel in 2020, you could just go to the store.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot easier for people to beef up.
Yeah, definitely. At character creation, if you chose a very high level of what was it again, the special ability or something, then you would have a lot of income, and you could have skin weave and all these crazy things. Yeah.
No, and I think that's why, you know, if you get to that point, just remember, you can always have them get fired from a job. You can have someone steal their weapons, their money. Someone can bomb their luxury condo, their vehicle. You can, like I said, if you've given it to them and you feel that was a mistake, it made them too powerful, creatively find a way to take it from them, you know, and just balance it a little bit better. And I think that's the best way. And Red also does something like a crit injury, which gets really dangerous. Not that 2020 didn't have stuff, but the other thing to remember is you can always drop in things like that. If you didn't roll it, maybe you got to force it. And that's, like I said, these are kind of last resort things sometimes as a GM. You want to keep it an open world and real. But if you have to, if things have gotten so, you know, the balance is off and they're just too powerful, go ahead and say that next enemy, when they shot him, a grenade launcher, a high powered rifle, you know, it was a critical injury and took off his cyber arm. Completely took off his cyber leg, and he can't get away. And now the police or CSWAT captured him, and they took him in, and they found out some of his other things are illegal weapons, and they stripped it of him. And now he's got to do a little jail time, and that's going to cost him a good portion of the money he had saved up. You know, so like you can always come up with creative ways to knock them back down a bit and get the game back to being balanced and more fun. And more dangerous. Exactly. Put that threat back to the player. They should never feel like they're on top of the world in Cyberpunk. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think sometimes that's difficult when you come from the mindset of epic heroic fantasy, where they are supposed to be on top of things most of the time. It can be difficult to switch to you know, you're just one of us struggling to get by.
I think my one of my players brought this up before, because I was running one of the games and there was some like really high powered security guys attacking this rocker boy at one of his concerts, and my team was like, oh God, they felt like they needed to protect him. Truth, they're all in the same party. But in Cyberpunk, sometimes there's situations where you have to run away. And that's very uncommon in like D&D, you know, like my friend said, he's like, oh, I think they were treated, because they just went at the security guards and it was so dangerous, and I had to do everything I could to keep them alive. It was so crazy. I couldn't believe that they, you know, one guy was running at a handful of high-powered security guards. But my other friend, he was like, you know, I think it's because they come from that D&D realm of gameplay typically. And that's the kind of world, you know, you come around a corner, you see a whole group of goblins or something. It's like, okay, attack them, you know, and like you see something, you're like, go for it. And like, you know, it's like this heroic moment. Whereas Cyberpunk, you come around a corner, like, oh shit, what's that? Let me look. Let me roll persuasion. What's going on here? I don't know. Let me avoid that. Let me. You're a little more apprehensive. It's dangerous, you know. So like in Cyberpunk, you might have times where you actually retreat and run away, and it's completely normal.
Another thing I really enjoy about Cyberpunk sometimes, because it's, you know, it's a city environment where, of course, there's lots of crime and all these kind of things, but there are also rules. And some places will just not let you in if you're, you know, armed to the teeth. You know, shout out to my good friend Aryan, who at some point had a character who had a wheelie bin full of guns.
That sounds like my wife. She's playing a solo named Raven right now during our Red gameplay. We do every Tuesday. And she's described her character. She's like a female Punisher. You know, like when she goes into normal club situations, she'll wear her dress. She has her pistol in her hidden holster in her leg, and that's it. So it's very low key. But when she goes into battle, and she's tactful like that, because like you said, you can't go to everywhere all armed up. It is a real city, you know? But when she goes into battle or combat zone or other places, you know, she's got her other very heavy pistol in a holster on the outside, her heavy pistol in the leg. She's got her shotgun strapped around, her rifle strapped around. She's got her, you know, she's got all these weapons. She's got her sword down her back. So it's like she's a female Punisher going in. But but you're right. In Cyberpunk, there's, you know, you're going to a fancy nightclub or the corp zone. You're going to, you know, normal places. You're not fully armored up. Otherwise, you're not let in, or the cops might stop you and question you, or a local booster gang might see that as a threat and instantly jump you or something, you know?
You get hassled. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Are there any other kind of specific challenges that are unique to running Cyberpunk, you think?
No, I think the hardest part is pretty much just trying to find that balance.
Yeah.
Like we kind of covered just a minute ago, is like a lot of people started with D&D and that, a lot of fantasy role-playing games, and when they come into Cyberpunk, it is a bit different. And
Yeah.
sometimes there is a little bit of a role-playing learning curve in that, to where like when you enter it, you got to remember that you're not the number one in this world. You're not the hero at all. Like you're another number, and you're trying to carve a spot out for yourself in the city or in this world. And it's dangerous. Everyone is fighting for a spot. And I think like in D&D and other fantasy role-playing games, you kind of start off feeling like I'm a hero. I'm here to, and like you can still feel that, like I'm here in Cyberpunk to make a difference to the city. I'm against evil corporations, or maybe I'm for it, or I'm this or that, or whatever your intentions are. You can still have that. But I think that's the only part that is a bit of a learning curve, is like a lot of players when they jump into Cyberpunk, you got to remember it's dangerous.
Yeah. And so for people wanting to get into Cyberpunk, they're getting amped up after this interview. They're like, all right, here's my money. I want to spend it on something. What would you suggest? Like, do you think people should, until the full Cyberpunk Red rules are out, what's better, getting into Cyberpunk 2020 or getting into the Jumpstart kit, or waiting for the video game?
Well, definitely. I mean, I think the video game is its own beast. I think the video game is so different in what it is. Everybody doing the tabletop role-playing game, get the video game, you'll probably enjoy it, and vice versa. It's like I said, it's its own thing, but it has the same genre, the same vibe, the same world feel. It's just, a different timeline, obviously. But as far as anybody wanting to get into the tabletop role-playing game, I would definitely say get the red Jumpstart kit. If you've never played before, get the Jumpstart kit. Don't worry about 2020, because if you do get into 2020, you're gonna have to learn a whole set of rules. It's very crunchy, and it's awesome. It's awesome in what it is. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But red is coming. You're gonna get into red when that comes out. You might as well just get into the Jumpstart kit and start preparing for that, because the Jumpstart kit has a good chunk of what red is. I mean, the rules, it's not much different from what's in the Jumpstart. It's just obviously in the core rules, it's expanded so much. There's so much more to it. But definitely, if you're starting out, get the Jumpstart kit and dive in. It's easy to comprehend, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it has its own cool adventure in it, which is called The Apartment. And 5 people are going to be fortunate or unfortunate enough to get to play that with me. Let's find out if I do okay.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I love watching gameplay, so I'll be watching that.
Yeah, so that particular game is not going to be streamed. Sorry, so it's but because it's an online convention, I'm going to be playing with people, I suppose, from different parts.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought Albacon was posting the game. They're not putting streaming the games.
No, I think
it's only some of them.
Yeah, I think some of them, but then it's specific to the person running the game.
Well, now I'm upset. You need to stream that one day so I can watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I will do is do a short report afterwards on
nice.
I guess like a bonus episode of the podcast. Yeah.
I like that. I like when streamers do that, because it's kind of I don't know, it sounds like a movie at that point. Like I love watching gameplay because of that. I can follow the story and all that. But then it has all the rules and rolling and things in between that maybe some people don't enjoy. I do, because I love gameplay.
Yeah.
But then I do love the summary thing that a lot of streamers do afterwards, where they'll kind of summarize just the storyline of what all happened. I don't know. It just sounds very movie-like. It's awesome.
It's going to be tricky to do it without spoiling the adventure for people who haven't played it yet. But I'll
that's
think
true
of something.
Too,
Yeah. But of course, every module, it is. But of course, I'll give it like small twists of my own.
And it always changes with players. You know how it is.
Yeah,
players always do something out of left field you don't expect.
Once the first die is cast, that's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Definitely. Yeah. Hey, and so one question that I ask all of my guests is the question: who is your personal hero when it comes to role-playing games? And I've got a guess in the back of my mind, but I'm
sure. No, for me, obviously Mike Pondsmith. Like I love, and I'm friends with the Gygax family. I know Luke, and his legacy coming from Gary and starting D&D and all that.
Yeah.
He's helped with some of the film work we're doing. I'm producing and directing a game shop. It's called The Game Shop, a series that we're starting next year about a game shop, role-playing games and stuff. It's gonna be really cool. I don't know if you're familiar with the DM Satine Phoenix. She's playing the DM.
Oh, really?
On the show. Yeah, it's
that's
gonna
cool.
be a lot of fun. But yeah, Luke came and sat in on a table read and like helped out with certain things. So I love the D&D background and Luke's family and all that, but I gotta give it up to Mike Smith, just because not just his background in role playing, what he's contributed. And I didn't find out until recently from Jay Grace, some of the details of things he created within role playing, like rule sets and things that have been implemented into multiple games and things, which I encourage anyone, look up Mike Pondsmith and learn more about him. He's a great guy and he deserves a lot more credit than he gets. But the other thing that I love about him is his whole family is behind it. Yeah. I've always been like that, growing up, and everything I've done from being a touring musician to my work in the film industry. I've always had the support of my parents. I've had the support of my wife. When I was touring, she would go with me and rock the merch table. And in film, she's been in my movies. She works set design when I'm doing other producing stuff. Like I'm just very family oriented. Yeah. And I love that about R Talsorian Games is that it's all the Pondsmiths. It's him and his wife, his son. Even the people they hired feel like family. Like everyone's just so personal, and it's just so cool. I love about them.
Yeah, definitely. And I get the feeling also that he seems to be very humble, despite everything that he's achieved, etc. He's like, I'm just.
Well, that's why you never hear about all the accomplishments he's done and things he's created. He doesn't sound off about it, and he doesn't. He doesn't pay a marketing company to push it out there. He doesn't have a publicist to really talk about his, his accomplishments and things. It's just, he's very down to earth. He's a humble guy that is just passionate about creating these games and this content. Yeah. But yeah, he deserves all that attention.
Absolutely. Well, he's in the Hall of Heroes now. Yeah. When it comes to my small podcast, anyway. All right. Well, I got to say, thank you so much for doing this. It was a wonderful interview.
Hell yeah. No, thanks for having me. I really had a good time. I really appreciate it. And we'll have to talk sometime soon. I'd love to have you on the Cyberpunk Uncensored podcast.
Yeah,
talk about some of the gaming and things that you've done as well. But no, I really appreciate it. I love talking about Cyberpunk, and anybody that's down to talk to me about it, I'm ready.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you. So another interview over, another RPG hero spoken to and learned from. And I got to say, this guy really, really loves Cyberpunk, and it shows, and that to me is just a wonderful thing, that somebody can, show their passion for something and share it with the world. My main takeaways would be that Cyberpunk as an RPG is relatable, maybe more relatable than some other games, because it's completely human-based. And because it's human-based, and because it's based on our existing world, and things are going on that feel like they might happen, or that they, if you play 2020, that have happened, it's easier to immerse yourself, which can be helpful. And LifePath really helps with this immersion as well. It's dangerous, which is really cool. So in any kind of role-playing game, it's fun, I think, when the danger feels real, because then it's exciting. And they've made combat as realistic as possible and made it very lethal. And the other thing about Cyberpunk is that it's full of attitude, which is just so interesting. The writing style just breathes it, when you read the text. And, my hope is that, and what I've seen so far is that Cyberpunk Red, the new version coming out soon, that it will streamline and clarify a lot of things without losing that unique Cyberpunk feeling. And on top of that, it will make net running something you actually want to do. So looking forward to that. And I'm going to be running a game of Cyberpunk Red at the Albacon convention, the online convention. It's a charity-based event, so people pay to play just a little bit, $5 or £5 or whatever it is, and all that money goes to a charity, and you get to play a game. So that's a lot of fun. My game is fully booked, so if you were getting very hopeful, sorry. There's only so much time in my day, but For sure, I will do a short kind of bonus episode on how that went and how I feel about Cyberpunk Red after that. Of course, it's just with the limited jumpstart rules, but still, it'll give me an idea. There are still tickets available to lots of other games at the Albacon online convention. So if you're curious, check the show notes for the link and go there and book a game. Why not? It's $5. It goes to charity, and it's a kids' charity, so that's always good. Well, you get to play a game. Hey, man, why not? Well, that's it for episode 20. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed recording. If you did, please consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps to get the podcast get heard. Want to keep up with the latest news about my podcast? Well, hop on over to Twitter at RPGHeroes1. Check out the full show notes with all the links at rpgheroes.buzzsprout.com. Want to support the show and join other supporters on my Discord channel? Then I would be honored if you check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/rpgheroes. You can also buy RPG products with my affiliate code. Check the show notes for more information. 2 weeks from now, I'll be talking to the creators of Sweden's most dark and grim RPG yet, Mörk Borg. Until next time, stay heroic.